Hello everyone. Welcome to all of you to our 4 episode celebration of 457th birth anniversary of William Shakespeare. Premier University Department of English Language and Literature since its inception has been celebrating the birth anniversary of William Shakespeare in a grand way. But because of the ongoing pandemic situation, DELL could not arrange the program like before. So this year, DELL has come up with a new mode of celebration underneath the title The Universal Shakespeare. We have designed each episode with different lectures rendered by our faculty members, which will be followed by students' performances. I hope all of you will enjoy our show. Our first episode will be inaugurated by our Honorable Professor Dr. Muhitul Alam Sir, Advisor of DELL and Dean of the Faculty of Science, Arts and Social Sciences. Sir will provide an introductory speech on the title of our show, The Universal Shakespeare. Sir's lecture will be followed by a recitation and a song performed by our students. Rishi Roy from 33rd batch will recite a sonnet and Raveen Samia Meme will sing a song for us. Thank you everyone.
Hello, everyone. We are very pleased to announce that the Department of English Language and Literature, known as DELL, of Premier University, which is located in Chattogram, Bangladesh, is going to celebrate the 457th birth anniversary of the greatest English poet and dramatist, William Shakespeare, over a series of episodes, beginning with the one today. And the title for this series of programs we have chosen is Universal Shakespeare, which is an echo of what Shakespeare's friend and also a rival poet, Ben Jonson, very famously said in the poem which he dedicated to the complete volume of Shakespeare's works, commonly known as the First Folio, which was published by his two friends, John Hemming and Henry Condell, in 1623, that is 7 years after the death of Shakespeare. Dear viewers, this is the first facsimile of that folio edition, and the engraving of William Shakespeare was done by Martin Droeshout. And here in this volume, Ben Jonson wrote that famous poem where he said Shakespeare, he was not of an age but for all time. That is, Shakespeare is universal by crossing the barrier of both time and space, which was also very well recognized almost 200 years after the death of Shakespeare, when the greatest English critic and scholar, Samuel Johnson, came to edit a volume of Shakespeare, to which he added an essay, Preface to Shakespeare, in which he said that Shakespeare is immortal, Shakespeare is a great genius because he has withstood the onslaught of time, and also he has crossed the geographical barriers. So, viewers, I welcome you all to enjoy this 5 episode program which we are going to launch from today. So, therefore, I will now briefly speak about Shakespeare's life and then what else we are going to plan to provide or offer in this program. He grew up in this small village town and then attended a primary school there, Stratford Grammar School, where he probably received the best kind of education in classical literature, in ancient Greek and Roman literature, which later on fertilized his creative writings. And then, dear viewers, at the age of 18, he got married to Anne Hathaway, who was 8 years senior to him, and that happened in 1582. By 1583, their first daughter, Shoshana, was born, and by 1585, Shakespeare's wife again gave birth to twin children. One was a boy called Hamlet, or some scholars say Hamlet, and the girl was Juditha. Hamlet died when he was only 10 years old, and it was a very shocking experience for Shakespeare, and his loss of the son is occasionally reflected in his plays. And then uh, Shoshana, his eldest daughter, was married to a very successful physician, Dr. Hall, and Shoshana therefore had a happy married life. They had one child, Elizabeth, that is Shakespeare's uh, granddaughter. Uh, she was also married, but then she didn't have any children. On the other hand, Juditha was married the year Shakespeare died in 1616. Juditha gave birth to a couple of children. One of them was a son, which happened to be Shakespeare's only grandson. But then Juditha's husband was a controversial figure. He was the son of Shakespeare's friend Thomas Queenie. His name was also Queenie. And Shakespeare was rather unhappy about this marriage, and therefore, in his will, he dedicated all his property to his eldest daughter, Susanna, leaving nothing for Juditha, and also for his wife. Very strangely, very mysteriously, Shakespeare writes that the second best bed is to be bestowed on Anne Hathaway uh, as the legacy to get from his will. And critics, have become out of their depth in order to explain why this mysterious phrasing uh, was crafted by Shakespeare, that the second best bed is to be gifted to his wife. Anyway, uh, sh- there is a strange kind of happening, because after 1585, after the birth of these twin children, and until 1592, for these 7 years, hardly any fact about Shakespeare is known, and therefore the biographers, they have called these 7 years as lost years, and there have been many speculations what really Shakespeare did during these 7 years. Some scholars say that he was engaged in teaching in a northern province, and some scholars say that he was engaged in uh, gaming activities, like catching games, things like that. uh, I mean, there is no uh, definite uh, information regarding what Shakespeare did during these 7 years. But by 1592, we come to know about the existence of Shakespeare because of Robert Greene, an elderly dramatist living in London, who wrote a pamphlet, Wordsworth of Wit, in which he said that there is an upstart crow who has come to this London uh, its stage world and is trying to shake the world. He used the word shake scene, and thereby uh, historians very well connect this statement with Shakespeare and upstart crow as referring to Shakespeare. And because Shakespeare came from outside, he came from Stratford and then he came to London in order to seek his fortune or make his career in the world of drama. And that is why he became a target of jealousy uh, on the part of the senior dramatist Robert Greene. Though it was a satirical comment on Shakespeare, but we see that Shakespeare was already making his presence felt in London during this time. And then from 1592 onward, Shakespeare continued his dramatic and poetic career until 1611. In 1592, he wrote his history plays Henry VI Part 1, Henry VI Part 2, Henry VI Part 3. And these history plays were followed by the romantic comedies like Comedy of Errors, uh, and all these funny comedies are there in the first phase of his dramatic career. Also, you can mention the Merchant of Venice, the tragicomedy which was written during this time in the earlier phase. And by 1597, 98, Shakespeare was growing into a mature dramatist. And by this time, his company, his theatre company, which was known as Lord Chamberlain's Men, they were occupying uh, an auditorium called the theatre, which was built by James Burbage, the father of Richard Burbage. Richard Burbage was the most important player in Shakespeare's company and also Shakespeare's friend. So James Burbage uh, took the lease for the theatre, but it was going to expire in 1599. So the owner of the theatre hall, he did not agree to extend the lease, and therefore Shakespeare's company, Lord Chamberlain's Men, they then formed their own theatre house on the other side of the river Thames, which was known as the Southwark. And there they built this theatre, which is known as the Globe. So the Globe is the first auditorium or the theatre which was structured, designed, and built by the actors of the Lord Chamberlain's company. So thereby, the Globe is unique in this fact that it was owned by all the actors with Richard Burbage and Shakespeare and William Kemp, and there were other 12 directors actually. So that is how Globe is unique and was a very popular stage site. And the Globe was an open sky stage, that is, there was no roof over the heads, and it was, though it is called the Globe, actually it was not circular in shape, it was rather octagonal, that is, eight sides. And Shakespeare famously refers to this theatre in his play Henry V, when in the prologue he says the wooden O, because the globe is shaped like the alphabetical letter O, and globe was made of timber. That is why it is the wooden O. And there are lots of references to this theatre house in Shakespeare's plays. And so 1599 therefore is a watermark year in Shakespeare's dramatic career because they started this new theatre house on the other side of the river Thames. And in 1603, Shakespeare, the monarch, Queen Elizabeth, that is the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth the First died, and then she was succeeded by King James the First of England, but he was also the king at that time of Scotland, known as King James the Sixth. Uh, he was uh, he was actually in a way a grand cousin of Queen Elizabeth. So when he took up the uh, throne in 1603, he also gave the royal patent to Shakespeare's company. By this way, the Lord Chamberlain's man came to be known as the King's man because the King James, was the patron of this theatre. So, the 1599, with the starting of the Globe, Shakespeare's career also took a uh, took a qualitative change. He started writing his great tragedies, starting with Julius Caesar. Side by side, the comedies were also continuing to be produced by him. So, Julius Caesar, one of his very successful Roman tragedies, was paired with As You Like It, which is also a very successful comedy. So, these two genres, tragedy and comedy, uh, were almost at the fingertips of Shakespeare. And this Julius Caesar was followed by Shakespeare's greatest work, the epitome of his career, Hamlet. Hamlet was produced in 1600, and then the 1600 and 1601, and then it was followed by other great tragedies. Othello was written in 1603 or 4. Then Macbeth came into being in 1606. King Lear probably in 1607 and 8, followed by Antonian Cleopatra and Coriolanus. And in the meantime, Shakespeare also wrote uh, tragicomedies like Measure for Measure, all these things. And the point is that in 1592 and 93, England was infected by the plague, and the theatre house was closed down. During these 2 years, Shakespeare spent his life in a confined uh, way and wrote his famous sonnets. As you know, Shakespeare wrote 154 sonnets along with two long poems, and biographers have located the period in at, in which Shakespeare wrote these sonnets could have been the years when he was put away from the theatre activities because of the onslaught of the plague, the pandemic, as we are suffering this year here, because uh, uh, every year we hold this program, in a physical condition. We use the auditorium of Premier University, uh, and but this year we have to celebrate this uh, birth anniversary online. And dear viewers, I have also uh, plan to mention that we owe our gratitude to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Anupam Sen, for having allowed us to organize this program online. And the first episode will be graced with a speech by him. And then after this, viewers, we have tried to devise this program in two episodes, each episode holding for 1 hour or slightly over an hour. And during this presentation of the episodes, we have uh, requested our colleagues, the faculty members of the Department of English Language and Literature, to speak briefly on many topics uh, that are important in Shakespeare's plays or issues and problems. So they will be therefore presenting their speeches, uh, maybe a 7 minute or to 10 minute speech, then these speeches will be frequently punctuated with performances from our uh, affectionate students who will be presenting recitation from Shakespeare's poetry or poems. They will also be rendering songs from Shakespeare's plays, and then also they will be, uh, I think, they will also prepare some video clips uh, showing some stage performances done by them. And now, dear viewers, I would like you to get introduced to the topics that our honorable colleagues are going to present uh, in the remaining session today, and also the session that will take place maybe tomorrow, or another time which we will find suitable for the airing of the program. So now let me have this opportunity to briefly discuss the topics that our colleagues are going to present uh, to you. The first speech to be presented is on eco-criticism on Shakespeare, which is to be presented by Sadat Zaman Khan, our very dear chairman of the department. And Sadat will speak how the ecological condition was also a matter for Shakespeare to focus, showing the merits and demerits when it happens that human beings, because of their aggressive developments, rather overshoot, and then they threaten the natural balance, and thereby the ecological condition becomes a target of this kind of you know aggressive development. So Sadat therefore will focus particularly on plays like As You Like It, where we find uh, the one of the major characters, Duke Senior, is ventilating his feelings that his life in exile in the forest of Ardennes has taught him that adversity or uncomfortable uh, living condition is not always negative. It also has certain positive elements in it. He was a duke. He had a very comfortable lifestyle, but here he is now banished and forced to live in this, unforgiving natural conditions. But then he says, I love these running streams. They are like books to me, and I can gather so much of knowledge about life, about the world. And therefore, this nature, as what was said, I mean, at a later age, that nature is like an educator to him. Similarly, here, Duke Senior says he actually is learning from nature. The tall trees, he says, they are like my good friends. So, therefore, this stoic wisdom that Duke Senior shows is an approval from Shakespeare that nature and mankind must coexist in a balanced pattern of life. Then nature itself was linked in Shakespeare's time. If we understand the philosophy of the time, nature was very much linked with the human existence. Uh, in their philosophical concept or in their thoughts. Therefore, in Shakespeare's plays, we find how nature is acting as a corresponding force with whatever is going on in the human world. So, in King Lear, when King Lear, for example, is in trouble, he is, he is banished by his daughters, and he is now forced to pass his time in the forest or in a barren heat, on a barren heat, and the storm rises, and he finds that the storm, this inclement weather, this cyclonic weather, is a reflection of the trouble that he is going through in his mind. So his sufferings are now correspondingly represented by the unstable condition in nature. So that is how nature and the human nature both are linked in Shakespeare. But today, in our modern time, we become so aggressively development minded that we almost threaten the sublime, serene existence of nature. So the ecological pattern is destroyed today, but from Shakespeare's plays, we come to know that Shakespeare had this perception or this genius in him to perceive that the condition, the relationship between nature and man is not going to be as it was in his time. And in Julius Caesar, for example, when Brutus is having this problem of conspiring against Caesar, he was not in mental peace. And then he said that, uh, and then on that night there was a storm in Rome. So he also found this reflection uh, of his own condition being in, being projected in the natural condition. He also refers to his bodily condition. He was having a trouble in his digestive system. So you see, in the Shakespearean concept of life, nature, man, politics, the political state, that is macrocosm, which is nature, macrocosm, which is the human individual, and the body politic, which is the state. All these uh, uh, three levels of existence were connected with one another in Shakespeare's uh, conception of life. Then Shahnaaz Parveen will come with Shakespeare in Bangladesh, or how Shakespeare is relevant for Bangladesh, the present Bangladesh. And I think she will have a lot to speak about it. Firstly, I think she will reflect how the political situation in Bangladesh time and again is also reflected in Shakespeare's plays. For example, Julius Caesar is a very good example to connect with the scenario of the 1975 in Bangladesh when our father of the nation, uh, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, was killed along with his family members on this fateful night of 15th August 1975. Exactly in the same way, you will see in Julius Caesar that the conspirators, led by Brutus, were trying to uh, murder Julius Caesar, and they did it on the 15th of March uh, in the year, uh, just the year before, before the Christian year would be counted. That is in the first year BC. Julius Caesar was brutally killed in the Parliament House of Rome, in the Senate House of Rome, the same way as 1000, nearly 2000 years after Bangabandhu will be killed. And then uh, population or people or mob or this mass people, they also occur in Shakespeare's plays a lot of times, and we know that Shakespeare was not very fond of this mass movement. He was rather critical about the people's support because their allegiance was very shifting. Julius Caesar says this, Hamlet says this, Coriolanus says this. So therefore, I think Shahnaz will find a lot of correspondences between the socio-political situation of Bangladesh and and the circumstances that prevail in Shakespeare's plays. And also, Shahnaz Parvini will refer to the uh, translation job that is being done by Bangladeshi writers who are translating, Shakespeare from the original into Bengali, and also how Shakespeare is uh, presented on the stage by Bangladesh theatre groups, and how also is Shakespeare or his stories are made into films. So therefore, Shahnaz has a lot to adjust, I hope, and she will do it. And then in the in the area where translation will be involved, I think she will have to focus on what kind of translation actually is desired, the literal translation or some kind of translation which you can say figurative translation or indirect translation or derivative translation or adapted translations. So therefore, this will give her a scope to compare and contrast between all these several forms of translation. For example, I can refer to Sayyid Sajjad Hussain, who wrote a play, not which is not a translation of Hamlet, but which is very much based on Hamlet. This is one example. Then Shamsul Rahman translated Hamlet, which I find is really well done, even compared to that of Sayyid Shamsul Haq. Sayyid Shamsul Haq's translation is lacking in certain areas because some of the issues that are important in Hamlet or Macbeth have not really surfaced in his translations. And then there have been many more, and I think Shahnaz will know how to address all these issues. And then the next paper will be presented by Syed Jasimuddin. Jasim uh, is speaking on sources for Shakespeare's plays. This is an interesting area. Though we know that Shakespeare is one of the most uh, frontline creative talents of the world, but it's interesting to know that all his plays were based on earlier sources. The plays were already known to the people of London, and uh, some of the sources were uh, very popular during Shakespeare's time. But Shakespeare, because of his magical touch, whatever he took up for the rendering, it took on the individual, distinct Shakespearean talent, and thereby it became a far superior reproduction of the original that Shakespeare found in the sources. Uh, for example, Hamlet. Let us speak about Hamlet. There have been uh, uh, earlier stories, Hamlet, Hamlet like this, and there is also a reference to an edition of Hamlet which didn't exist, but probably which did exist, which is known as the Ur Hamlet. But whatever Hamlet Shakespeare had created is a very different and superior version of the earlier sources. So Shakespeare therefore had always improved upon his sources. And for his Roman tragedies and Roman plays, he mainly depended on North's translation, Thomas North's translation of Plutarch. Plutarch's Lives of Great Romans and Greeks was translated by North, in such beautiful prose that there is evidence in plays like Antonio and Cleopatra or Coriolanus or Julius Caesar that Shakespeare almost just put into the poetic form the great prose rendering of Thomas More. So in this way, you see the sources were the fertilizing uh, aspect for Shakespeare. He capitalized on them and he did some deductions, he did some additions, and finally, whatever he produced was something very unique. Another fact that Justin probably will focus on is that during Shakespeare's time, the collaborative work was the main go of the day, that is, collaboration. And therefore, there are many plays which Shakespeare had to write with his peers for the company. Uh, Hamlet is an exception. Hamlet was totally written by Shakespeare from beginning to end. But in the case of Macbeth, there is great doubt that the scene where uh, uh, this Macduff is holding this long conversation with Malcolm probably was written out by Middleton. John Middleton was also a very talented writer, a younger writer who was, let us say, who was impacted by Shakespeare's genius, and some of the scenes that he contributed in Macbeth, uh, like the witches scene in the second stage. Scholars say that it was written by Middleton. But again, the very late research into this area has proved that the scene which I mentioned between Macduff and Malcolm was actually written out by Shakespeare. But anyway, this collaboration practice was a thriving practice, and Shakespeare, therefore, uh, in some plays, he was not only the individual writer, there had been other contributors too. The last play he wrote, or is given to his credit, Henry VIII, is is a result of the collaboration between six dramatists, and Shakespeare only wrote 147 lines in that play. So this is also a fact. Shakespeare, therefore, was a collaborative writer, but at the same time he was a great writer. So these sources, therefore, will be important for your scene. One play is particularly emphasized, A Midsummer Night's Dream, as not having owed to any other sources. But again, scholars also find you know, some uh, some passages in some other literary works which seem to be in the background of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Anyway, Shakespeare is Shakespeare, whether he borrowed or whether he depended on other writers. It is his genius by which he, shot up to the zenith of success. Then the next speech will be given by Ghazi Shahadat Hussain, which is very much relevant to our present time, Shakespeare and pandemic. Now, pandemic uh, is is the very cause why we have gone online for this program. But in Shakespeare's time, plague was the main form of epidemic. During Shakespeare's life, uh, thank you. This is my dear wife. She has brought a little drink for me, so that I can continue speaking with vigorous force. Thank you. Yes, viewers. So what is happening here is that uh, Shakespeare's in his lifetime, London was infected with plague two times, 1592 and 1590, which I already mentioned in connection with his writing period of the sonnets. Then he also had to encounter plague again in the earliest period of the 17th century in 1603 and 4. So these two times Shakespeare had to keep himself away from the stage activities. But surprisingly, you see, though it was a very deterring fact for Shakespeare, somehow in his plays the epidemic has not featured much. Uh, well, people curse other people, characters curse other characters with this pestilence or epidemic, but epidemic as such, for example, which we find in Thebes in Oedipus Rex, that kind of pestilence never features in Shakespeare's plays. The, Shakespeare's plays are actually crowded with wars, wars after wars, battles after battles. So, plague, therefore, is mentioned, is very much in the consciousness of Shakespeare, but it hardly seems to have occupied his, creative mind. So I think Ghazi will have to find out sources and facts in order to support this issue that how Shakespeare's writing was impacted by a pandemic situation. Then Rafiqul Islam will speak about Shakespeare and chess. Interestingly, Rafiq was the junior chess champion of Bangladesh 1980s, and so therefore I understand why he has chosen this topic. And then uh, we know that one play by Shakespeare is very famous for uh, giving a space to a board game, probably chess, in his last regular play, The Tempest, which was written in 1611, or some scholars say some 1613. Uh, so in this play, we find Ferdinand and Miranda, that is the hero and the heroine, are engaged in a board game, and which looks to be a game of chess. And now this has a symbolic aspect here. Chess is a very disciplining game. Chess is a game for disciplining our mind. And here, Prospero is just watching over this couple, playing at chess from behind, uh, not seen by them. And here, Prospero as the guardian is very watchful to see that this young pair, does not cross the limit. They are not yet married. They are not a married couple, so that nothing untoward should happen. In order to stop that, uh, uh, Prospero engages them in a game of chess so that they probably become, morally, uh, you know, disciplined. Or in Shakespeare's other plays, chess as itself is not referred to, but many terms like move, like make it, these very favorable terms from chess are frequently used in Shakespeare. So I think Rafiq will not have much of a problem to shape his paper or his speech, elaborating on how Shakespeare was impacted by this uh, beautiful game. Then Abdul Rahim will speak on colonial and post-colonial Shakespeare. It's a very large area, and Abdul Rahim will probably have to do by supplying uh, more information than depth. That is, he won't have time to dive deep into the issues of colonial and post-colonialism. He will have to only refer to the facts and figures on a surface level. And today, you see, uh, Shakespeare is being viewed by many critical quarters as having initiated the colonial temperament in his plays. They refer to the play, The Tempest, as announcing the act of colonialism at an incipient stage. Because Prospero, he comes to an island, he occupies this island. The island is owned by Sycorax, the mother of Caliban. So Prospero can be viewed as the British East India Company from our, from our perspective, and Caliban may be viewed as the natives, the Indian. Okay, and Prospero, therefore, when he is trying to impose his rule over Caliban, Caliban resists, Caliban revolts, Caliban rebels. Caliban says, "You have taught me the language, but the only use I find is to curse you." And in many editions, this conversation is given to Miranda and Caliban. But in my opinion, it should be actually Prospero who should be addressed by Caliban when Caliban is bitterly unhappy about this imprisonment Shakespeare Prospero has kept him into. So this therefore is a signal uh, text for colonialism. If we actually travel into to 150 years later, we will find Daniel Defoe writing a novel, Robinson Crusoe, almost repeating the experiences of the Tempest, where a white European goes into an unknown island in a very strange part of the ocean and takes control of the island, and thereby he becomes the ruler there. So this European white colonialism had to start in history from the time of the Renaissance. And even some historians prefer to say that before the Elizabethan writers wrote their great plays suggesting this geographical expansion or these global voyages taking place, there was a mindset created by the elites of the society that England must become an imperial power. We can refer to John Dee, Dr. John Dee, who was an important member of the Elizabethan court. He advised Elizabeth to form a royal naval force in order to take control of the sea. And he said, this England must become an empire. So, what I want you to understand is that before the physical colonialism had started, there was already the mental conception in England and in other countries of Europe that empires should be established, which means colonialism should be established. So, uh, Rahim will have to speak about this. And for post colonialism, now there is an interesting thing. Nothing in Shakespeare now, today, can be read without this double edged formula that Shakespeare is both the greatest representative of colonialism and imperialism, and at the same time, he is also a spokesman for the people who have been colonized or who have been ruled by imperial forces. So, therefore, Shakespeare is both a feeder of colonialism and also a fertilizer of anti colonial spirit. So, post colonialism, therefore, wants to study, based on the studies of Edward Said, Orientalism, and everything, that post colonialism, therefore, wants to exploit or utilize Shakespeare as a power of resistance. Then one West Indian writer has very famously said, English is no more the language of England, it is the language of ours. So, if that is the idea, then we can also say that Shakespeare is ours. And again, in Germany, for example, in the period between the two world wars, when Hitler came to power and Germany was ruled by the Nazi regime, Goebbels the information minister of Hitler's ministry, Goebbels, advised his chief commissioner to exclude all writers from the curriculum of Germany except for Shakespeare because he said, and actually the scholarship on Shakespeare was growing very intensely in Germany, only second to England, or maybe today only second to England and USA. Shakespearean scholarship is the most thriving project in Germany. Even today, all great scholars like Schlegel, for example, and there are other Werner Hebisch in the modern time. They are all great Shakespeare scholars. So Goebbels therefore said Shakespeare was born in England by accident, but Shakespeare actually is a German. They actually believed in it. So this is how you see you have to look at Shakespeare that because of his you know multiple selves, it is not very difficult to own Shakespeare. In Bangladesh, for example, we can also own Shakespeare for so many reasons. So Rohim might therefore have a great scope to speak on this. And then what I had left saying in with regard to Rohim's speech can be also substantiated by the speech to be given by Shahidul Alam Chaudhary. He will speak on Shakespeare as our contemporary. And Ian Cott, the Polish critic, he became worldwide famous as a Shakespeare scholar by writing this book, Shakespeare, Our Contemporary. So, this contemporizing Shakespeare will be very much the theme of Shahidul Alam Chaudhary's paper, and we have already reflected on this while we were discussing Rohim's paper or Shahnaaz Parvin's paper, that how Shakespeare can be integrated in the social psyche of any culture or any country. So this I know about Shahid. He takes a lot of interest in visual aspects of Shakespeare. So I hope in his speech he will probably show us some video clips where these exchanges are taking place between the original English culture and their negotiations with the outer cultures or cultures from other parts of the world, and that will be quite interesting. And Kohinoor Akhtar will speak on the language of Shakespeare. I must refer to a book written by David Crystal, one of the most well-known linguists of our time. He wrote a book on Shakespeare's words, in which he very interestingly said that though we by tradition think that it is the themes that guide the formulation of the language in Shakespeare, but it is not always true because he shows by evidence that in so many cases Shakespeare seems to have been carried away by his love for the language. So it is the language that glides into the characterization pattern. That is, the language sometimes uh, is the is the force that makes a character happen. So I think Koiner will keep it in mind. And also, Shakespeare's language is really magical. His use of similes, longer similes, conceits, metaphors, imagery, analogies, and then counter analogies, and all the figures of his speeches, oxymoron, uh, these things and imagery, all these figurative aspects of the language have been so well toyed with by Shakespeare that many critics think that Shakespeare's school, the primary school which he attended, he never had finished high school or he never had a college degree or university degree. But with this primary school learning, the competence Shakespeare shows in dealing with the language is a very solid manifestation and testimony to how good the primary school education was in England in the later part of the 16th century and also in the earlier part of the 17th century. And for example, uh, let us refer to the Merchant of Venice, okay, where Bassanio, the poor Bassanio, he wants to propose to Portia. Bassanio is living in Venice, and Portia is living in an isolated island called Belmont. Belmont was the island owned by her father, and her father is now dead. She has become the rich owner of the island, and now competitors, that is, suitors from all over the world, from Morocco, from Scotland, from England, from Venice, they are all participating in the trial match where Portia will choose her life partner. But because her father has set a condition that whoever will marry you, he will have to win the casket uh, competition that is there. But anyway, Bassanio wants to go to make a voyage to Belmont, and also he needs money. So Bassanio goes to his friend Antonio to borrow some money, and Antonio says, "Why? Why do you need so much of money?" And Bassanio says, "In Belmont is a lady richly left." Mark this line. In Belmont is a lady richly left. Iambic pentameter. In Belmont is a lady richly left. Beautiful. Or we can also refer to Hamlet, full of beautiful lines. When Hamlet says, "To be or not to be, that is the question," which actually uh, paraphrases philosophy about life. What should be done and what should not be done. What should we do and what we should not do. Every time, every moment, life is presenting us with a problem of choice, and this needs to be settled. To be or not to be, that is the question. When he has encountered the ghost, an extraterrestrial being, and he comes back to his friends, and Horatio is asking him, "How did it go with the ghost?" Then Hamlet says, "There are more things, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy." That is, we know this world, we can see this world, but probably we don't know this world, we don't see this world. There are so many things beyond our seeing, beyond our touching, beyond our feeling that exists. So there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. And we can also refer to this very oft-quoted passage from Julius Caesar, which actually gives the definition of what heroism means, what courage means, or what cowardice means. Okay, Calpurnia, Caesar's wife, is asking Caesar not to go to this, you know, meeting of the senators because she had had a bad dream the previous night. And Caesar says to her, "You cannot stop me from undertaking this little walk to the Parliament House from my house because I am not a coward. Cowards die many times before their deaths, and the valiant never taste of death but once." That is, coward people die even at the hint of a threat. But it is the courageous people, the heroic people, who go ahead, defying all the challenges. And if they die only for one time. Beautiful. Cowards die many times before their deaths. Iambic pentameter. And the valiant never taste of death but once. So this is how the language will help uh, to build up her speech, she can also refer to the sonnets, beautiful series of sonnets. And Shakespeare says, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" Iambic pentameter. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? And there are so many lines, unending. Then Shantanu Das will come with a speech on cross-dressing in Shakespeare. Cross-dressing means transvestism, or man changing into women or women changing into men. Before I speak on this issue, I must, tell you about the stage fact in Shakespeare's time. In his time, women usually by tradition did not take part in the public stage. So on the public stage, the female roles were done by boy actors. The boy actors whose voice had not yet broken. They were chosen because of their uh, acting talent, and they performed as women. But when we are speaking about the cross dressing, it means the boy actor will play the role of a woman. So all Shakespearean great characters like Rosaline in As You Like It, Cordelia in King Lear, Desdemona in Othello, Ophelia in Hamlet, Portia in the Martian of Venice, Hermia, Titania, Helena in A Midsummer Night's Dream, or Hippolyta. All these great female characters were actually performed by boy actors. Okay. Now, Shakespeare gives a very unique treatment to this cross-dressing device by making or by not taking it as an end in itself, but as a means to an end, by which he wants to prove that when a boy is taking the attire of a girl in order to perform as a girl, he certainly undergoes the feelings of a girl. So therefore, his feelings as a boy and those as a girl, these contrary feelings get mixed up in his character. So therefore, this brings up a kind of uh, you know, chemical reaction in the characterization. So therefore, in As You Like It, for example, uh, Rosalind a number of times says, why do you think that I am a man? Only because I am wearing the attire of a man, you think my inside has also changed? No. Inside I am a woman. So give me the name of my lover. Which lover is that? Then Celia says, after sustaining for a long time, Celia says, Orlando. Okay. So here you see, Rosalind wants to say that though she is changed into a male attire as Ganymede, but her inner self, which is that of a woman, has not changed. But again, the point here, if you remember now, that the actor who was performing as Rosalind was a boy actor. So the boy actor has now changed into a woman called Rosalind. And then Rosalind takes the disguise of a man called Ganymede. So again, the boy actor is turned into a boy again. And again, as Ganymede, Rosalind is now going to teach Orlando the love lessons as Rosalind. So what is happening here? The first original boy actor is changing to Rosalind. Rosalind is changed into Ganymede, and Ganymede is again changed into Rosalind. So the same boy actor had to perform in as many as four roles, and the boy actors were very, very talented in Shakespeare's time. Now, this is not the only pleasure that Shakespeare derived. There is another fundamental pleasure Shakespeare brings in here. Rosalind, when she has taken the dress of Ganymede, she looks to be a very young, bright man. And now she happens to talk to Phoebe. Phoebe is a peasant girl. And Phoebe falls in love with Rosalind. You see, Rosalind, because for Phoebe, Rosalind is not a woman, but a man. So you see, Rosalind, therefore, is a man here, but she is a woman. And Phoebe falls in love with the appearance of man in Jerusalem. And this also is done very beautifully in another play, uh, Twelfth Night. In Twelfth Night, you see, this is a beautiful comedy, also based on disguise. In Twelfth Night, uh, Viola is the central character. Viola has taken a job under Orsino, and Orsino has fallen in love with Olivia. But Olivia is a kind of reserved woman. She has decided, not to fall in love with anybody. So now, uh, when Viola is employed by Orsino, Viola has taken the disguise of a man, a page boy. Now Orsino sends Viola to Olivia with a love letter or with a proposal of love. Okay, so Viola goes to uh, Olivia with the letter of Orsino. And Viola here is not Viola. He is a page. She is a page boy. And interestingly, as it happened in As You Like It, uh, Olivia falls in love with Viola because to her Viola is a man, but Viola actually is a woman. Now Shakespeare solves this problem by creating a twin brother for Viola, whose name is Sebastian, and he was supposed to be drowned, but somehow he got rescued by a stranger, and he also comes back to the court of Olivia for job. Now Viola is Viola, but Sebastian is her twin brother, and Sebastian resembles Viola exactly as it is said in Hamlet, Kapape. That is, from point to point, the brother and the sister look alike, but the sister is in the shape of a page boy. So what happens? You see, at one time, the page boy does not go to uh, Olivia. Sebastian goes, and she proposes to Sebastian. But Sebastian is a man, and Sebastian is very surprised that we never met before. How can you propose marriage to me? And in this way, this becomes very, very interesting. So, disguise, therefore, is not only a stage device, which was just a kind of funny device in the hands of other dramatists, but in the hands of Shakespeare, this stage device, cross-dressing, became a source of more serious interpretations about life. Then, Chaudhry Rumana will speak about songs in Shakespeare, and we know that if we watch films, there are always songs. A Midsummer Night's Dream, for example, is very famous for this music. It is almost like a musical play. There are songs, there are dances. The fairies dance. They sing lullabies, and apart from these comedies where music is there, in the Tempest, for example, music almost in the ear. Caliban has a very keen ear for music, and Caliban says this island produces good music. Ferdinand, listen to this music. So this island in the Tempest is full of music. And then, if we also speak about As You Like It, there is a beautiful song sung by Amiens under the greenwood tree. And Rumana can actually speak on this. And then in the tragedies, Desdemona sings a song, very sad song, just moments before her death. And it's a beautiful song where the deprivation of a young female lover is expressed. The same kind of tone is maintained by Ophelia when she goes insane and speaks about her deprived life, and the songs are also lullaby type but beautiful. So Romana, I think, will be able to speak on this. Now, politics in Shakespeare is to be presented by Muhammad Sulaiman Chaudhry. and there is no end of it. There is a volume called Political Shakespeare, edited by John Dacakis, uh, Martin Oiten, all these famous scholars. And Edward Said has famously said that I cannot read any major piece of literature without thinking about the politics which produced it. And Stephen Greenblatt, when he called Shakespeare a phenomenon, he also said that Shakespeare did never write anything without some kind of political motive behind it. He discusses the history plays in his very beautiful biography, Will in the World, or How Shakespeare Became Shakespeare. In that very enjoyable reading, he discusses how the history plays, the comedies, the tragedies, the sonnets, all these are somehow intertwined with the political awareness that Shakespeare could ventilate. So, in his history plays, it is the kings who are to rule, or the kings who are to be, deposed. Uh, Regicide is a big political question there. Killing the king, or usurpation, removing the king. All these great issues. Who actually would rule? Who should be the ideal ruler? These very Renaissance concerns, which were also elaborated upon by Francis Bacon, Thomas Eliot, all of them were equally concerned as much as Shakespeare was about how the country should be ruled. So all these tragedies, Hamlet, King Lear, Othello, uh, Macbeth, these are very much both historical tragedies and contemporary tragedies. And then uh, this the relationship between the subject, the king and the subject, this also comes in the way of Shakespearean drama. So the point I wanted to remember here is that uh, uh, the ambition of an individual to be a king, as we find in Macbeth, how it is to be dramatized. And here we also must point out that Shakespeare dramatizes all these royal plays where kings are killed or usurped, or these legal questions are there. Here, Shakespeare wants to highlight one thing, that no moral idea or no ideology is superior to the life of an individual. In Julius Caesar, it is very well dramatized. When Julius Caesar has been killed by Brutus in the name of protecting the republican democracy of the Republic Rome, but it is exposed finally to be nothing but a vacuum of feelings, a vacuity of feelings, because Caesar died, Caesar was killed, but then the Republic could not continue. It was replaced by the Roman Empire. Octavius Caesar became the first emperor of Rome. And again in Macbeth, we find that the regicide has not paid. Macbeth suffers and finally loses his life. So I think that even though it is not proper to say that Shakespeare wanted to highlight some kind of morality through his dramas, because Shakespeare always gave priority to the dramatic element over any other issues, moral issues or things. But still, then, at bottom, if we can track down the thinking of Stephen Greenblatt, we should come out to say that even the least political play in Shakespeare, for example, A Midsummer Night's Dream, has certain politics in it. So therefore, Suleiman Chaudhary will have to do a lot of hard work here in order to find how politics is always the structural binding behind all Shakespeare's plays. Then Sarah Ishita will speak about migration in Shakespeare. Uh, we must tell you that Sarah is planning to migrate to a developed country, as I have heard. So probably therefore she has chosen this topic as it echoes whatever she is going through right now. And to guide her into making this speech, I can only refer to uh, Comedy of Errors, where a lot of migration is there, and many other plays. Of course, The Tempest is there, uh, which are in a way plays set in an island, which of course implies migration. The white Europeans migrating to distant lands of the world. And at the same time, you see, migration also means not only means geographical migration, migration also means uh, mental migration. Oh, before this, oh, something has occurred to my mind in connection with Kohinoor's paper. I might forget it. I must tell you about this. When Kohinoor will be discussing on the language of Shakespeare, I think she also should refer to Samuel Johnson's comment on Shakespeare that Shakespeare sometimes sacrificed his dramatic logic in order to fine tune his language. And then he uses a word. Samuel Johnson uses the word quibble. Quibble means a word which gives two meanings, that is, double entendres. And Shakespeare was very fond of. If you read his plays, he was very fond of explaining, deconstructing a word which has two meanings, or three meanings, or four meanings. Therefore, pun as a figure of speech is very much a property of which Shakespeare is, a master. He is very much at home in figurative language. So then Johnson said, when a word, quibble, came to Shakespeare, it appeared to him like Cleopatra, and he will chase it, the word, in giving every shades of meaning. And until he has exhausted that word, he will not come back to his theme. So therefore Johnson very famously said, a quibble was like a Cleopatra to Shakespeare. He will chase it as Antony chases Cleopatra. Okay, and with this again I come to Sarah Ishita's migration topic, and I have already mentioned Antony. Antony chased Cleopatra. Antony, migrated from Rome to Egypt. But this migration does not only work geographically, this migration also changes his mindset. In Rome, Antony was the most competent general. But in Egypt, when he comes to this eastern part of the world, of the known world, he becomes fascinated or, mesmerized or hypnotized by this magical atmosphere that was prevailing in the kingdom of Cleopatra. And as Julius Caesar before him fell in love with Cleopatra, as Pompey the Great before Julius Caesar fell in love with Cleopatra, Mark Antony happens to be the third Roman general who has succumbed to this beautiful, you know, pleasure seeking Cleopatra. So much so that Mark Antony forgets his role as the he was one of the triumvirate as the one of the rulers of Rome. He forgets his Roman discipline. He forgets his strict life pattern as a soldier, and he begins to, let us say, waste his time, as Anovarba says, waste his time in the company of Cleopatra. And at one point, when he tries to commit suicide, he fails. Then he says very famously, my sword is made weak by my affection. That is, my affection for Cleopatra has taken away my virility as a soldier. So, some people, therefore, some critics try to see the connection of the reference to the sword by Antony, to his virility as a man, to his penile existence. So therefore, Antony has lost his virility, his male dominance, because he has given in to the attractions of Cleopatra. My sword made weak by my affection. And therefore this change is a psychological change which has occurred to Antony because of the change of place. So migration therefore does not only entail the shifting of the ground but also the changing of the mind. We also can refer to Othello. The same thing is happening in Othello. Othello is in Venice. Though he is a colored man, he is in Venice, he is a strong ruler. But when he is given this mission to come to Cyprus to stop the aggression of the Turkish forces, he comes to Cyprus, but that he he begins to forget his role as a military general. He begins to listen to the whisperings and conspiracies of Iago, and then it leads him to disbelieve his beautiful wife Cordelia, the white Cordelia, and she thinks that Cordelia sees another man behind his back. So Othello therefore kills Cordelia. Sorry, not Cordelia, I'm very sorry, Desdemona. Othello, Cordelia appears in King Lear. Othello kills Desdemona without even cross-checking the information and facts fed to him by Iago. So therefore, this change of place from Venice, which was the cultural capital of Europe at the time, from Venice when he has made this journey to Cyprus, his mindset has changed, and he has become a wife killer, a husband who is very much similar to many husbands in Bangladesh who prefer to kill their wives. So this therefore is the result of migration. Then Joanna Tabassum Banu will take up proto-feminism, that is the feminist criticism of Shakespeare. And this is the most uh, growing area in Shakespeare scholarship. Before feminism or feminist criticism, it took this academic shape. Shakespeare was read from one kind of perspective. But after this advent of feminism, Shakespeare is now read from totally a different perspective, in which we begin to see that the relationships have now been redefined, not from the perspective of the male view, but from the perspective of the female view. Elaine Showalter, for example, one of the prominent, feminist critics, has discussed Hamlet, particularly Ophelia, and she does not stop short of referring to Ophelia's physical condition, including menstruation, everything. So by this, the feminist criticism is trying to you know unfurl and unfold an area which was let us say which was taboo, which was not really touched upon. And now how these feminist characters, for example, feature in Shakespeare, we can understand the Taming of the Shrew, one of the earlier comedies of Shakespeare, where Katharina or Kate is producing a speech which is very disappointing for the feminist readers of Shakespeare, because Kate there in that speech says that the duty of a wife is to surrender to her husband. She even says that we should lay our heads at the feet of our husband because they are our providers. But actually, that is not the total truth. Shakespeare always he has this gift of always, you know, uh, enriching his statement by uh, integrating a counter thought. So here, Kate can say, um, is speak in this docile manner only at the point when she is confirmed that Petruchio, her husband, is completely under her control now. So after capturing Petruchio 100%, then Kate or Catherine says that it is better to surrender to the husband. And then when we come to the tragedies, Desdemona, in spite of her, you know, young age and innocence, Desdemona is a protester against patriarchal dominance. She has chosen her own husband, defying the hegemony of her father Brabantio. So she has chosen Othello, a black man, already in the middle years, but this does not refrain Desdemona from choosing Othello as her husband. So this is also a very big sign of protest. Being a Venetian girl, defying the proposals of young prospective Christian bridegrooms that she has chosen, going against all norms, Othello is in itself a declaration of liberation on the part of a Shakespearean heroine, though she has to lose her life because of this choice. We can also speak about Cordelia in King Lear. She says, in the face of her father, I love you as your daughter as much as I should, nothing more, nothing less. King Lear, the old king, is unable to understand this line, and she he banishes Cordelia. But it is finally Cordelia who will rescue King Lear from his sufferings. But then Cordelia will also die, tragic death she will also face. But the point that she has made is that girls are not to be, controlled or dominated by this male hegemony, which is again very much, uh, shown in Hamlet in a different way. In Hamlet, Ophelia listens to the advice of her guardians, her father and her brother, Polonius and Laertes. Both of them ask her not to continue in this relationship with Hamlet because Hamlet is beyond her orbit. Hamlet is the prince today and he will become the king tomorrow, and there will be better matches coming for Hamlet. So Ophelia should rather stop seeing Hamlet, and she listens to them. By listening to them, she loses her heart. Not only that, she loses her insanity because she has lost her Hamlet. So, this very phase of her suffering that Ophelia goes through is an indication that though she has outwardly obeyed her guardians, but inwardly in her mind, she has remained isolated and preserved her fondness for Hamlet, and she becomes insane. She, in a way, she meets with death either accidentally or maybe, you know, committing suicide. It is not clear in the text. And then we can also come to A Midsummer Night's Dream, a beautiful, comedy, one of the best comedies of Shakespeare. But here we find the play beginning with a uh, debate between the father and the daughter. The father is Aegeus. Aegeus wants his daughter Hermia to marry Demetrius, but Hermia wants to marry Lysander, her boyfriend. So the father brings the daughter to the court of the duke, the Athenian duke, where only two options were left open for a girl who disobeyed her father, either to join a nunnery to pursue the religious vocation or to get executed. And the duke wants 3 days time, and in the meantime things happen, and Hermia wins her lover Lysander. But the interesting thing is that when Aegeus says that I want my daughter to marry Demetrius because he is my choice, and Hermia says to the duke, I wish my father had looked at Lysander with my eyes. You see, So this problem between the parents and the daughters is also very much to be seen in every family in Bangladesh. The guardians think one thing, and the daughter or the son, even in cases, chooses another thing. So this conflict over the choice of a life partner occupies a major space in Shakespeare. We already referred to the Merchant of Venice, where similar thing happens. Portia cannot marry anybody as she likes. She has to marry somebody who fulfills the condition set by her father, who wins the uh, casket competition. Okay, so Bassanio does it in a way, and then the feminism also is becoming the feminist criticism is also becoming a kind of, let us say, uh, a kind of let us say, a kind of conservative approach to Shakespeare. When you too much emphasize on finding how feminism is, you know, broadened by Shakespeare or highlighted by Shakespeare, you are in danger of missing out on other things which Shakespeare provides. So my point here will be that feminism, of course, is a very powerful tool to discuss Shakespeare's works. But at the same time, it should also be diluted by allowing other approaches, critical approaches, to play their roles. And finally, our Duhita Chaudhuri, the youngest faculty in the department, she will speak on racism in Shakespeare. And we have already referred to Othello, and then we have also referred to uh, the Merchant of Venice. And then we will also refer to Titus Andronicus. These three plays have three characters from different races and culture. In Titus Andronicus, Moore is the villain, but he comes from a different culture. He comes from a North African culture. His skin color is black, as much as that of Othello. But Moore here, he has this uh, physical relation with Tamora, the queen, and they also have a son. But because of this racial problem, uh, Moore is asked to sacrifice his son, but he never does it. So this play, Titus Andronicus, is a very violent play, full of murders, and it is one of the most blood curdling plays by Shakespeare. Okay, and Macbeth is only second to it. And here, Moore, he tries to protect his son against all this attack, and he shows his fatherly passion and fatherly affection, and thereby he becomes a villain, but a significant villain uh, because of his fighting for the life of his son. Then in the Merchant of Venice, Shylock is the other. That is, Shylock is a Jew coming from another culture. In Venice at that time, Venice was a very prosperous city in Europe at the time when the Merchant of Venice is set there. But here, though Venice is a prosperous city, Shylock is now running the usury trade. The trade based on usury. Usury means money begetting money. That is, money producing money like children. And Aristotle, in his book Politics, specifically spoke against usury by saying that usury is bad because here money begets money without having the money being invested in any kind of production. So that profit is okay, where the profit comes from some kind of investment. But the profit that comes only from money, according to Aristotle, is baneful and therefore is to be forbidden in society. And in our religion, Islam, usury, that is should, is prohibited. And also in Christianity, uh, interest is prohibited. But In The Merchant of Venice, the way Shylock is portrayed, you see that Shakespeare probably has double minds about it. That money here does not only mean a pecuniary interest, money also means a wisdom of the material world. Interest is approaching coming here as commodity. Commodity means the interest in the material world. In the play King John, a historical play, there is a character bastard who speaks a long speech in favor of commodity. So a crown, for example, for Macbeth, a crown is a commodity. A throne for a king is a commodity. All this commodity, possession of the commodities is important because they bring earning for you. A king earns money by holding the throne in his possession. That is why there is competition over the throne. The throne itself is not very important, but the throne is the gateway to so many, earthly profits. So therefore, in Shylock, therefore, this question is important that money is not only how you look at from the point of usury. Money is also an indication of the material success in life, which is not a blame to hold on to, which is not a blemish. Okay, so let us see how Shakespeare plays it out. Bassanio, as I have said, Bassanio needs money to travel to Belmont. And Bassanio comes to Shylock, prompted by Antonio that you borrow money from Shylock, I will pay it back. And Shylock is asking Bassanio, what is the guarantee that this Christian Antonio will have his ships back in 2 months' time? And Bassanio, very rather ignorantly says, "Oh, yeah, these ships are bound to come. They will come, and when the merchandise will come, we will sell this merchandise and give you the 3,000 ducats, that is $3,000 back to you." Then Shylock, very softly, as if tries trying to inculcate this piece of wisdom into Bassanio says, what is the guarantee that your friends Antonio's ships will not be struck by cyclone on the sea? What is the guarantee that the ships will not be stranded at the offshores of the world? What is the guarantee that the sea rats will not uh, will not create hole into the bottom of the ship, the wooden ship? What is the guarantee that these ships are coming back to you in 2 months' time? So this very piece of wisdom about the material world, which is not known to Bassanio, is an important piece of wisdom. And therefore, many critics are unhappy about the ending of The Merchant of Venice, saying that, you see, at the end of the play, you see that Shylock is not only forced to surrender his property in favor of his daughter Jessica, who has who has uh, married a Christian, Lorenzo, but he is also forced to convert himself into a Christian. So this very decision is, though it is not carried out in the play because Shylock goes away, he disappears. But this rule of conversion is imposed on him, and many critics are unhappy about it. By the way, I remember another point in connection with this topic by Duhita, which has a bearing on Shantanu Das's speech on cross-dressing, because in The Merchant of Venice, Jessica, the daughter of Shylock, when she is eloping with Lorenzo, she is wearing the attire of a boy. And she says, because it is night time, I am not ashamed of putting on the boy's dress. Otherwise, if it is at daytime, you would have embarrassed me by looking at my naked thighs. But as you know, Jessica was also performed by a boy actor, and the boy actor became Jessica, and then again Jessica turns into a boy in order to escape with Lorenzo. So again, this point was left out by me. And now racism again. Here we find Othello. Othello is a black Moor, and he has married a Christian girl, white Christian girl. So it is a breach of decorum on too many counts. But somehow the Christian community in Venice tolerates Othello because they have a greater danger to tackle. The Turkish are invading, almost going to invade Cyprus. Cyprus was a province under Venice. So therefore they need the military capabilities of Othello to defend Cyprus against the invading Turks. So therefore they send Othello to Cyprus, and Desdemona says, I have not married Othello not to accompany him. I will also go with him." So thereby Desdemona accompanies Othello to Cyprus. Okay, but as I have said earlier, Iago, you know, Iago shapes the conspiracy in such a way that Othello becomes convinced that Desdemona has been unfaithful to him. So, therefore, the only thing for him left is to kill her, and he will kill her. But here, I will refer to an actor, a black actor, Hugh Quarshie, who was a member of the Shakespeare Royal Theatre. Okay, and he never agreed to perform in the role of Othello because he thought that Othello, this character, was created from some racist prejudices. And if I perform as Othello, it will mean I have subscribed to Shakespeare's racist prejudices. So therefore, he refrained from performing in Othello. And the point here is that when Othello finally kills Desdemona, then it becomes clear by the it becomes clear for the Christian audience that whatever they thought initially about Othello, that has come to be true. Othello comes from an inferior culture, from a subordinate culture. He lacks in sophistication. He is uncivilized, and therefore, at the moment of crisis, he is unable to uh, put his reason into action, and he rather was driven by passion. And since he is a Moor, a barbarian kind of creature, that is why this wild savage streak has come out of his character, and that finally compelled him to kill Desdemona. So it means though Shakespeare experimented with Othello as to give him the noble dimension of a tragic character. He probably does. But by the end, it can also be recognized that Shakespeare, probably unknown to him or implicitly, has subscribed to the European white uh, uh, opinion about people from coming from subcultures. So they thought that black people or North African people or Asian people, all these are inferior creatures compared to the white Christian uh, people of Europe. That has somehow been finally proved because Othello could not but kill Desdemona. So in this way, Hugh Quarshie can be uh, can be considered as having said something which we cannot deny by exercising our reason. But finally, to conclude this speech, uh, I would have to say that Shakespeare never does subscribe to any ideological concept as such. So racism, therefore, was not very much, uh, though of course he was a child of his society, he could not be absolutely different from whatever other theological or intellectual or elite thought paradigms prevailed. But still, he was a genius. He was far ahead of his time. he had this extraordinary perception to look into the truths of the future. So we can say that Shakespeare cannot be held a racist. So with this, dear viewers, I have probably spoken for a long time, but I think I needed to do it in order to uh, place how the Department of English Language and Literature, DELL of Premier University, very proudly announces that they are the lovers of, they are in love with Shakespeare, great love with Shakespeare. So that is why I have taken this time. Uh, and again, I wish everybody the best, especially the Premier University, the authority, the Department of English Language and Literature, and also my colleagues and my students who are very, dear possessions to us. So with this speech, I would like to thank you all, and please enjoy the presentations that are going to be shown to you online through videos. Thank you once again. Bye bye. Take care. All the best.
Sonnet 116 by William Shakespeare. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds, or bent with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever fixed mark that looks on tempest and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose oaths unknown, although his heights be taken. Love's not a time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out to the age of doom. If this be error, and upon me proved, I never writ, or no man ever loved.
Who comes to lie with me under the green oak tree and turn his merry note to the sweet bird's throat? Come hither, come hither, come hither. Here shall he see no enemy but winter and rough weather. Who doth ambition shun and loves to live in the sun, seeking the food he eats and pleased with what he gets. Come hither, come hither, come hither. Here shall he see no enemy but winter and rough weather. Who comes to lie with me under the green oak tree? Who comes to lie with me under the green oak tree? Under the green oak tree. Thank you.